All right, let's go into our speed round questions, huh?
All right, let's do it.
35 minutes in. This is a great time for some speed rounds. I got 7 of them here. Okay.
All right.
What has to be true before someone should even think about scaling?
You better have what you already own maximized.
Okay.
And then ultimately making sure that you're in a financial position and a time position to do it.
I think you already answered this question, but you already answered. Is there a number of properties where scaling actually gets easier?
Yeah, 3 to 4.
3 to 4.
Yep.
What matters more for scaling? The quality of the deal or operating at the highest level?
I don't know what you're asking there.
Like if I want to scale to my second property, is it better to find a deal that's maybe the house is cheaper and the interest rate is lower, or is it better to operate my first property or that property maximize it?
Maximize. I'm always a fan of maximizing.
Okay.
Right. So you maximize by basically finding quality deals, quality markets, quality locations, right?
Yeah. Okay.
We always say quality properties in quality areas, and then that allows us to maximize, right? So we're always looking to maximize as we scale, maximize. This is a game where, like we said, you don't have to have 100 doors. In fact, you don't want 100 doors. You're much better off with a smaller, high producing portfolio. That starts with the quality deals. That starts with the quality markets.
Okay. All right. What's the biggest warning sign that a property does not belong in a scalable portfolio?
Well, again, it goes back to the markets. Like when we were doing our boardroom HQ on Friday, we were talking about acquisition.
Right.
And we were looking at, there's a lot of people looking for their first property and a lot of people there looking for their second or third property. And we were analyzing markets. And when we start to look at these markets where the average acquisition price versus the revenue, that ratio is not favorable, it's not going to be a good property to put into a scalable portfolio.
Okay.
Right.
So maybe the market, not the property.
Yeah. It's the market potential. And then obviously finding those properties that can fit within that potential. There's always outliers and properties. Like what did I talk about on Friday? I said, listen, you have to what we're doing is we're going to create a very specific buy box. And our buy box is going to be so specific that we're going to be saying no to 80 to 90% of properties. And so it's understanding that most properties probably are not going to fit into your buy box. And you have to be okay with that, right? And so it does have to do with the property. So it's first and foremost market. Second, you're saying no to a whole bunch of properties because they don't all fit. And so it's understanding what are all of those criteria that allow us to be very specific about what we're looking for, a very specific buy box, so that we know the ones to say, yeah, I'm not scaling with that one. I'm not scaling with that one. So it's first market, then it's property.
Okay. What expense feels painful at first but becomes a non-negotiable when scaling?
I think a lot of buyers don't feel this expense, but I see resistance toward it is your realtor partner.
Wow,
so
I was not expecting that.
So your realtor partner is, especially if you're not in a local area, like if you're not in that area, that local knowledge from a good realtor is invaluable. And it costs money, right? And so there's money that, like, I don't buy any properties. Like I own a brokerage in Utah and had for years. I had my license for years. I don't anymore, but Teresa still does. And we know how to sell houses. We've sold a lot of houses. We've written a lot of contracts. We know how to negotiate deals. I still hire a realtor every single market and every single deal I go into because I want to know the nuances of the market. And I don't think people, especially new investors as they're scaling, put enough value on that information to be able to, and because we're talking about locations and we're talking about micro locations in markets and we're talking about properties. Your realtor partners can be really, really valuable in understanding those local the local nuances in a market and that local knowledge that you're going to have a hard time understanding unless it's right in your backyard.
Okay, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting that one. How does scaling change the way you think about risk?
So scaling, when you start to understand the scaling, the possibilities with scaling a portfolio, like it starts to not feel as risky, right? Because when I buy my first property, most people, you're not retiring on your first property. In fact, you can, a lot of times your first year, you're taking that property and you're running the numbers in your head and you're saying, man, I heard Sean talk about 5 properties and being financially free. Or Dan and Claudia's, we just in Tampa, they only have 4 property portfolio. They're completely financially free. And a lot of times we just calculate forward that one property and say, I'm never going to be financially free, right? Times this by 5, it doesn't work, right?
Right.
That's not necessarily how the game is played and how it works. And so when you start to understand scaling and we start to write down all of those levers that we can pull, and then the capital in, and then being able to do it the second time and the third time, and we write it out on a piece of paper. When you start to understand scale, you start to realize the risk is in not scaling. The risk is sitting on one property. Unless you're literally just trying to supplement a lifestyle asset, it's a lot riskier to just sit, and it's more expensive, it takes more time, more money, your returns aren't as good when you only have the one property. When you start to scale and you have a really quality portfolio of a handful of properties, it can make a massive difference. And it's hard to understand that until you really write it out and fast forward what that actually looks like and means, and what that can mean over a 5 or 10 year time horizon.
Okay, now you may have kind of just answered that this next one. What's the clearest sign someone is ready to scale, but they don't realize it yet?
If the property is maximized, it's making them money, it's going into an investment bank account, they're still earning their active income, and they're still building that investment bank account up. There's, you're clearly in a financial position to do it. You've clearly learned on property number 1 what it takes to succeed. So they're like, okay, do they actually realize that by going to property number 2, property number 3, property number 4, and building this, what that really looks like for them? And I think I would challenge everybody listening to write that stuff out and decide what does a 5 property portfolio look like based on the types of properties that I might already have in my portfolio, and based on, or if I'm looking at properties, based on the capital I have available and what that's going to look like to do that 5 times.
Okay. A lot of this to me seems like knowing your numbers, knowing the market numbers.
It's all numbers, right?
Yeah.
It's all data.